sweeter?
No one.
Hey, what's up, Gator Nation? Zach Alverde and Nick Del Toro here, and it is game week, folks. We are ready to kick this thing off. The 2023 season is here. This is our final day in Gville. Nick and I will be flying out to Salt Lake City tomorrow, and we will be joined out there by Josh Newman from KSL.com, who will join us on today's show to preview the Utah team that we're going to see on Thursday, taking on Florida at 8 p.m. on ESPN. So definitely looking forward to that. And before we get into the preview, start talking football, we definitely want to send our thoughts and prayers to everybody in the path of this storm. Make sure that you guys stay safe and bunker down, because nothing to play with. And it's unfortunate every time we get to this time of year, Nick, sometimes this is something that we have to worry about. But we're on the road for week one.
Yeah, luckily we're getting on the early Tuesday flight. I think Florida, we asked Billy Napier a ton about it. Why are you only leaving Wednesday? Psych, might have to leave Tuesday. I don't know if Florida is getting 150 people out of Gainesville Regional Airport on Wednesday. Probably going to have to switch that up. But let's knock on wood, Zach, because we're definitely not driving to Utah. And I'd like to be there. First time in Utah, first time in Salt Lake City. Would like to get that plane ride out on Tuesday morning.
Absolutely. No, we're looking forward to it. And for everybody that's subscribed to the Gators Online YouTube channel, stay tuned, because we're going to be having a lot of content coming on this page, a lot of coverage at Gators Online as well. So if you're not a member there, we've had our special basically throughout the fall camp and throughout this season, where you can get yourself in the door for $1. But if you like what you've seen, you like what you've read, you can do the whole year right now with our kickoff sale for just $50, $49.99 to be exact. That can get you in the door, full year membership for new subscribers to Gators Online. So make sure that you guys take advantage of that. And also make sure that you take advantage of a little deal and promo code that we got going on at birddogs.com. And definitely want to give a shout out to our sponsor at Bird Dogs before we bring in Josh Newman. Florida fans, you can go to birddogs.com, use our promo code Gators to get a free tech hat with your purchase. Nick has been looking fly in that thing since he got his order. I've got all my stuff in the dryer, ready to come with me to Utah, and that's the polo. That's the khaki shorts as well that I got a couple pairs of, and definitely encourage you guys to go check that out at birddogs.com. These shorts have got a winner out of me. They give you a truly sculpted look, do the same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. And the shirts have been awesome as well. So definitely encourage all you Florida fans to go to birddogs.com and use our promo code Gators. And now we are going to switch gears and bring in Josh Newman of KSL.com to talk about this Utah football team. Josh, how's it going, man? Appreciate you joining us.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Absolutely, man. We are here for round 2 of this home-and-home series between Florida and Utah. Obviously a classic in Gainesville last year, and Utah goes on from there and wins the Pac-12 for the second straight year. They're back now for another season with Cam Rising, we think, maybe, possibly. I'm sure we'll get into that. But tell me about this Utah team and kind of what this offseason has been like for them since that second Pac-12 title.
Yeah, a lot of the same faces return. Look, Cam Rising, Braden Keefe at tight end. I think he caught like 7 balls for 90 yards in last year's Florida game. 60% of the starting offensive line, most of the defensive line, the vast majority of the defensive backfield, the linebacker room is stacked. So, but even within all those names, I mean, the number 1, 2, 3, 4 storylines were the quarterback and what that's going to look like. For the listeners and viewers that aren't aware, like Cam Rising tore his ACL in last year's Rose Bowl. And in the 8 months since then, the only thing that we've been talking about really is the timeline and can Rising get all the way back for this opener on Thursday night. I mean, look, I'm not a doctor. You guys are not doctors, but, look, we cover sports for a living. And I think we understand that asking an athlete to rehab and get fully back and cleared inside 8 months to play a football game is a bit of an aggressive timeline. But even still, the company line from Kyle Whittingham, the head coach, has been, he expects Rising to play. That's always been the expectation. And, Rising in the media that he's done, either whether it be with the beat writers or with local radio, it's like, I expect to play Thursday night. But that's certainly in doubt. Not saying it's not going to happen, but it's certainly not in stone. We talked to Kyle Whittingham this morning, and after a month of some transparency about Rising, he's now keeping things close to the vest. We're going to talk to Rising here in about 2 hours. I don't expect him to say anything crazy, and we're going to see where it goes. But it's probably an honest 50-50, maybe 60-40 in favor of Rising playing Thursday night, but that is just not yet set.
I think the biggest thing, well, one thing, as you clearly noted, none of us doctors, none of us MDs, and obviously we don't know what was the extent of Brant Keithy's knee injury. Was it just an ACL? Was it ACL, MCL, PCL? Was there a setback? But when I look at Kyle Whittingham saying, hey, these guys are on similar timelines, Brant might be a little ahead. I'm like, well, Brant tore his ACL 3.5 months before Cam did. And why are they on similar? And listen, a tight end, especially one like Brant Keithy, is moving around differently than Cam Rising would be asked to. But I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, why are they on similar timelines when you had so many months apart from the injuries?
Yeah, the Keithy thing, that's kind of like the how do I say, like the underrated, forgotten storyline this month because everyone's so focused on Rising. As you alluded to, Nick, I mean, Keithy tore his ACL in late September, and no, it was not MCL and the whole thing. It wasn't a full reconstruction. It was an ACL, and I remember, obviously Keithy was out for the year, but he was at Rose Bowl Media Day, last year with the team, right? We're talking about like December 30th. Post-surgery, he's in the middle of rehab. And I asked him, I'm like, look, what's the timeline? What's the story? He's like, I'll be good. Late spring, early summer, I'll be good for the opener. And then camp starts and he's limited. And he's been limited the whole time. So you're talking about, 10 and a half, 11 months post-injury, and he has not gone fully in practice. Now, again, I'm not a doctor, you're not a doctor, but it would seem that there was either some sort of setback with rehab, or they were being a little coy with what the injury actually was. I've been told all along from sources that it was a straight ACL, not a full reconstruction. So the point that I keep going back to is that if Rising doesn't play, whoever the backup is could really use Brant Keithy, because Keithy is a guy that that you can target 8, 10, 12 times a game, and he's going to get you 8 catches, 9 catches. You can go to him on third and manageable, third and long. So, if Rising doesn't play, whether it's Bryson Barnes or Nate Johnson starting at quarterback, I think that's a huge thing to be able to have Keithy for that backup if Rising cannot go.
And then the other issue with Cam is also, what are you, even if you're cleared? Being cleared isn't your 100%. Cam Rising murdered Florida with his legs last year. 91 rushing yards. He extends plays. He extends drives. He moves the chains with his legs. How effective are you when you play? And I don't think that we can answer that, but decades of sports journalism here, I venture to guess you're not going to be the same player you were when you were in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium against Florida last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, look, Kyle Whittingham and Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator, they're not in charge of this whole thing, right? The medical team is in charge of this whole thing. And he's not going to be rushed back. I'm pretty sure his parents, who are, sports savvy people who raised multiple Division I football players, are not going to allow Cam to be rushed back. So this is up to the medical team. And if the medical team says no, then it's a no. What does fully clear look like for Rising? I mean, look, you have to be able to move laterally, and you have to extend plays, and you have to do things with your legs. And as you said, that's a huge part of what Rising does. I think he ran for 91 yards or something against Florida last year.
7 carries.
On 7 carries, extended plays. And look, when Rising is healthy and when Rising is going well, Utah is comfortable calling, 6, 8, 9 designed runs for Rising. We saw that in the Pac-12 championship game. We saw that in the first Rose Bowl a couple years back against Ohio State. So if Rising is not able to do all these things, I really have very serious doubts that they would put him out there at, I'm making this up, 85%, 80%. They're just not going to do it. It's not worth it to them to put him out there on Thursday if he's limited. It's just not going to happen.
Now, Josh, what has Rising's availability looked like in fall camp in terms of, and I don't know how much practice you're able to see or what you're privy to, but how much 11 on 11 has he done? How much 7 on 7 has he done? What's that look like?
Yeah, so this is one of the favorite topics of the Utah beat writers. We've seen 0% of practice. Okay, 0.
Is that typical?
Yeah, as long as I've been here since late in the 19 season, and 0% during the fall. The spring they used to get a lot more, but now the spring is kind of shut down a little bit too. But I could talk about this all day. Anyway,
baby, Kyle Whittingham has been there 15 years. He is a tenured professor showing up to class with socks and sandals on. You ain't firing me.
No,
close it down.
He's got more job security than almost anybody in the country. So, but to the point here, Kyle has been, a little more transparent than normal for the first 3 weeks of camp. I mean, look, Rising was cleared as a limited participant for the beginning of camp. And what limited means is he's working with the first team offense. He can do some things, but not everything. Like, he was not doing 11 on 11 in pads, not doing full team activities. They wouldn't let him move laterally, no sudden movements, no sudden cuts. And that was the story for the first 3 weeks of camp. And then last week, Kyle starts with the coach speak. We asked what his status was, and Kyle used the word, he's progressing with the offense. So that was up for some debate. He did his weekly pressure this morning, and he kind of completely shut down what he was willing to say about anything, really. It was like one of the more benign Kyle Whittingham Monday pressers that I can remember in my time here. So, but look, Kyle will not tell you straight out like what is happening generally, but he will say enough where if you pay attention, he is trying to lead you down the road to the right answer, leading you down the road to what you want to know. So,
what was that road today, you think?
The road today, if you're listening about Johnson versus Barnes, that's still like a thing. Like, QB2 is like a little bit unsettled. Okay, the depth chart that came out on Friday had Barnes at number 2, but then he starts talking about Nate Johnson has made strides. And I kind of took it as, the whole thing in totality, I kind of took it as they have not fully ruled out Rising yet. They are still holding out hope that he can go. But even if you are cleared at this late date, what does that look like? Like, you've taken no 11 on 11, nothing live. Look, he wasn't going to get hit during practice anyway, but has there been enough time as the unquestioned number 1 to knock the rust off and to work with your new center? It's going to be very likely a true freshman left tackle on Thursday night. Like, have you had the time to do all of this? To me, and I think I wrote this last week, if Rising was going to play on Thursday night, your soft deadline to have him like ready and able and like ready to go was probably Thursday or Friday. Because if you had him ready to go Thursday or Friday, you had 3 or 4 practices, more like 4 or 5 practices, one of which would have been in full pads. So, look, he might be the guy Thursday, but just based on the timeline and based on things that Whittingham and Ludwig have said, it's a little hard to imagine Rising going. But on the flip side of that, look, he's an older guy, okay, 6th year in college. This is his 5th year at Utah, 5th year working under Ludwig. They trust him with the offense inside and out. So if he comes, again, I'm making this up, if he comes to him today and says, I'm ready, and the medical staff clears him, he's probably going to go. Not that I think it's a great idea, but if he's ready to go, he's going to go.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We're joined by Josh Newman from KSL.com. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, and you've spent all off season, and we'll spend. I think it was you that I first saw that noted. Kyle Whittingham said at Pac-12 Media Days, maybe it was going to be 10 to 14 days, and if Cam wasn't cleared 10 to 14 days before the game, he would be out. And now we've gone down to 10 to 14 minutes before the game. So we've talked plenty about Cam. I want to talk just more about Utah, and I think coming in last year. the general consensus among myself and Zach and everyone here in the South was that the Pac-12, may she rest in peace, just plays this finesse style of football. And we were like, they're not going to come in and they can't handle the SEC size and speed. And we were quickly met with the realization that Utah has some big boys and they can run and they will punch you in the mouth. What does Utah return in the front seven on defense and along the offensive line? Because I heard Kyle Whittingham today say he thinks this might be one of the best teams he's ever had.
Yeah, he has used that phrase. He does think that, that this is one of the most talented teams he's ever had. And the defensive front seven, that's not something that he generally worries about. That's something that always is a factor at Utah. Van Fillinger, who is a fourth-year junior on one defensive end spot, he's probably the most physical, bulldog defensive end that this roster has. I think it was 5 or 5.5 sacks last year before he was lost for the season due to a knee injury. He's back. Other side, you're looking at either Jonah Ellis or Connor O'Toole, two program kids who are not super highly rated recruits. Connor O'Toole was recruited as a tight end, but they identified him as a potential defensive lineman. That has panned out. And then in the middle, Junior Tafuna is a former Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. You talk to some guys on the defensive staff. They think Junior Tafuna is going to play on Sundays, right? That's how talented they think he is. And then, look, the linebacker room is loaded, right? That's another position where it just rolls right over. There's no reload. It's just retooling what you have, right? Guys in the program. Lander Barton, last season's Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. He's a monster. He's got the pedigree, right? Both his brothers played for Kyle Whittingham. Both of his brothers are now in the NFL. Levani Damuni is a Stanford transfer. For as bad as Stanford was last year, Levani Damuni led that Stanford team in tackles. So you've got, the point here is you have a lot of veteran guys in the defensive front seven, and veteran guys who have been in the program, guys who know what Morgan Scalley, the defensive coordinator, expects, but you've also fortified what you have with the transfer portal. Not just a linebacker, but other spots around the roster. But for as many questions as there are about Rising and will he play and what does the offense look like, and if it's Barnes, can they score points? It's you might be worried about that, but there is no gaping hole on this Utah defense. There's depth, and again, there's veterans. Now, they've gotten a little banged up here during camp because they probably hit a little more than they did during last year's camp. So we'll see who's ultimately available, but you might see some guys either limited or out, and Utah's probably really going to need some depth to step up on defense on Thursday night.
Final couple things here with Josh Newman. Josh, before we just get your kind of overall thoughts on the game and some of the key matchups in your eyes, I want to go back to the quarterback position and also just the kind of weapons that we see from Utah on that side of the ball. Now, we know that Bryson Barnes is going to be the backup to Rising. What should Florida fans expect from him? What does he look like in the opportunities that he's gotten? And then who are some other weapons that Utah has on the offensive side of the ball outside the tight end spot?
Yeah, so Bryson Barnes is, it's actually an interesting story, okay? Walk-on kid from a very small high school in southern Utah, set all kinds of state passing records at his tiny 1A school, walks on here and kind of becomes this folk hero, right, to Utah fans, enters the 21 Rose Bowl against Ohio State midway through the fourth quarter when Rising went out with a concussion, and he almost steals the game, right? Throws a
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you back, Josh.
Sorry. So Barnes is, this interesting story. He's kind of a folk hero. He's a strictly a pocket passer. He can take off a little bit, but they really don't want him doing that. He's most comfortable in the pocket, surveying the situation. Very cerebral type of kid. Doesn't make a ton of mistakes mentally. He's just limited in what he's able to do. Now, if it is Bryson Barnes for Utah, can Bryson Barnes beat Florida? Yeah, Bryson Barnes can probably beat Florida, but he's going to need a lot of help. Like, the offensive line is going to have to do its job. The running back room is going to have to step up. I'm a little more bearish on the running back situation in Utah than some other people covering the team, certainly the fan base. If it's Rising, anything's possible, but if it's Barnes, he's going to need a lot of help against Florida.
No doubt. And then final thing for you, Josh, you've been previewing this game, talking about this game, writing about this matchup. In your mind, and I mean, this is kind of a hard game to predict and preview because of the unknowns and what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. But what are some keys to the game? How does Utah win this game? How does Utah lose this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think to win this game, I think you have to make Graham Mertz uncomfortable. Obviously, Graham Mertz, as we've talked about here for a while now, Graham Mertz is not Anthony Richardson. Okay, Anthony Richardson killed Utah last year, not with his arm, but with his legs, and he would tuck it and go. And Utah missed a million tackles. Graham Mertz is not that guy. So if your front four is getting home, and if you're dialing up some timely blitzes, just making him uncomfortable, making him make mistakes, I think Utah is going to be fine. Utah loses this game, and again, as you said, I mean, it's hard to forecast this thing because we don't know who the quarterback is officially. Let's just say, for the sake of arguing, that Rising is out, right? Let's say it's Barnes. It's kind of the same thing. Like, take care of the ball, don't make a ton of mistakes, and if it is Barnes, they're not going to ask him to do everything. Okay, mm-hmm. Bryson Barnes, he's not going to be asked to throw the ball 30 times, 35 times. That's just not going to happen. So all you need from Bryson Barnes is, again, take care of the ball, don't make a ton of mistakes. He's going to have to make some throws at some point, but you need everybody else around him, specifically the running backs, Jaquindon Jackson and Mekhi Bernard and Jalen Glover. You need these guys to really produce, to take pressure off of Barnes. If everybody else is doing their job and you're not asking Barnes to do everything, I think Utah's going to be all right.
Good stuff, man. Well, Josh, we appreciate your coverage. We've all been following along. I know not just Florida media members, but Gator fans trying to get updates out of Utah. So we appreciate the coverage, man. Folks, you can follow him at Joshua_Newman on Twitter, or X now is the official name.
It's called now.
Josh, we appreciate the time, and we'll see you out in Salt Lake, bud.
Stay safe and travel safe, guys.
Thanks,
all right,
Josh.
Sounds good, man. Josh Newman from KSL.com. And listen,
Northeastern guy, transplanted out Midwest. Listen, I don't know what the dynamic is on that beat. You know, some beats you get a lot of homers asking questions. That's like, you remember James Crepa, who he covered Auburn and Gus Malzahn, and James was from, I think, like New York, New Jersey, and Gus Malzahn was always like just getting needled by him. I think Josh Newman might be the guy needling Kyle Whittingham out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I was on ESPN Gainesville here Monday, and somebody asked, like, before Whittingham's presser, if I thought and Steve Russell thought he was being coy, and we both didn't think so. But now I think he is, based on how Josh described his Monday presser. So, I mean, hey, the fact that they haven't had viewing periods like we get here at UF, and people don't really know what's going on at practice, he's able to do that and keep Florida guessing all the way up until the day of kickoff. So,
buddy, Meyer, Muschamp, Mullen, and now Napier. Florida's had 4 coaches, and Kyle Whittingham has just been gliding, coasting, winning some Pac-12 championships, winning 8 games, 9 games. My guy's golden. He's like the West Coast version of Nick Saban. He's fine.
Yep.
Nick Saban,
and like
today,
you said, that when you reach that status, you get to close practice.
When you're tenured like that, baby, you do whatever you want. Nick Saban walked into his press conference today, was like, I know you guys are going to get a depth chart, but you're not getting the depth chart because I don't like my players to be distracted. Nick, your players are going through practice. They can see what the depth chart is at practice.
Yes.
Are you canceling practice because you don't want them to see where they are in the pecking order on the depth chart.
That's the
But
funny
when-
thing about it. You're right, is because everybody that's out there at practice knows who the ones and the twos are. They literally say ones,
literally
twos,
yell,
you're up,
twos.
threes.
Why isn't anyone on the field? Well, we don't know who the ones and the twos are because the depth chart would create distraction, and then we wouldn't have competition. So when you yelled ones and twos, we didn't know where to go.
Well, listen, we know where to go. That's Salt Lake. Nick and I will be flying out on Tuesday morning early with Keith, and we're looking forward to this trip. So we're gonna switch gears here now, and Nick and I will preview this matchup and give some of our thoughts and takes and kind of what to expect. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our next sponsor, and that's My Perfect Franchise. If you are ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net or calling or texting him at 404-973-9901. And Nick, now it's time for us to get into to this game. We've been writing about it, making bold predictions, listing key matchups. We will have our official predictions out at Gators Online on Wednesday, so you guys are going to have to wait for that. We're not going to give our picks on this show, but we will make you wait for that juice. But I think we feel good enough about this matchup to kind of break it down for you guys based off everything we've heard and seen in Gainesville this week. It's nice, Nick, that we don't usually, this would be a week because of the storm that we're not even sure if the game is going to happen. And that's not the case. Florida's going to get out of Dodge, and this game is going to go down on a Thursday, a rare road opener for Florida, a true road opener. The Gators haven't had many of those. This is just the third time in the last 38 years. That dates back to at Miami in 1987, and then Ole Miss in 2020. But if we're talking about leaving the SEC footprint, Nick, I mean Florida is going out of the way for this game in Salt Lake City. There's obviously that factor of the newness of this trip. These teams have only played twice before, and both times were in Gainesville. But there is the other factor, and Napier and Ricky Pearsall kind of dismissed it this week, in my estimation. But that is the elevation of 4,637 feet that Rice-Eccles Stadium sits at, and what type of impact that could have on a visiting Florida Gators team that is used to playing down in the swamp where it's hot and humid and not that high in elevation. But Nick, like I said, they basically brushed it off as no big deal.
It's interesting to me because growing up, we would go skiing every year. And I mean, that's different elevation. You're up in the mountains in Breckenridge or in Copper and Aspen, Vale, wherever. We're talking 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 feet when you're up, in the mountains, in the Rockies. I think it will have an effect, but not as much, in my opinion, as like last year. It was hot. It was like high upper 80s, and then it downpoured, and then it was just mid 80s, but 80% humidity because it had been pouring.
Yep.
And I think that's probably harder to acclimate to. It's hard to breathe. And I think more so with altitude will be just catching your breath and maybe getting short of breath quicker. But once you catch it and you have oxygen tanks, I think it's different than, you can feel like the weight of the humidity on you when you're in Gainesville. And listen, you and I have lived here our whole lives. I'm not used to it. I'm 34, not used to the humidity at all. So, I don't think it will be as big of an impact. And listen, I could be wrong. You and I can get there and we'll let you know on Tuesday afternoon, walking around being like, listen, guys, the altitude is gonna play a factor. Zach and I are having trouble walking up the stairs to our hotel room. It's gonna play a factor, but I don't think it will.
I feel like because of all the heat and humidity that we've been dealing with, I feel like our body's gonna be like, bring it on.
But I mean, it's hot there too. It's a different kind of heat. It's that dry heat. You felt it out in Las Vegas. I've felt it out in Arizona, and it's going to be like highs of 90 on Thursday. But like then the hashtag nice projection forecast for kickoff is 69 degrees, and like, hey, that feels nice. I'm gonna bring a sweater. I'm going to enjoy myself. It should be interesting. You hear a lot about the stadium, and it seats almost like just a little bit more than half of what Kyle Field did, and Florida was there last year. It seats a little bit more than half of Tiger Stadium, which Florida plays at every other year.
Florida played at Neyland Stadium last year, y'all.
So like,
Ricky Pearsall was like, it's not SEC.
The writers out there say like it's one of the best Pac-12 environments.
I can believe it.
But what does that mean?
I mean,
now Utah does play way better at home, and this shouldn't come as a surprise. Most teams play better at home, but Utah has won 14 straight, 24 of their last 26 games at home. They averaged last year 12 points less per game at home than on the road. Like, this team plays well at home. They're going to have a red out. They're wearing all red, looking like the Kool-Aid man. Florida's can't just roll the ball out there and Florida's going to walk in and win the game. Like, Utah's going to punch you in the mouth. We saw that last year. This is a physical football team. I think I've seen fans saying like, Florida's faster than them. Just play silent, get the playmakers the ball in space. I'm like, yeah, Utah can run too. Like, this is a good program. And Florida's going to have to scratch and claw to win this game.
They will. And I said it when Josh was on, Nick, but like, this is a tough one to predict. This is a tough one to forecast because I feel like without Cam Rising, Florida wins.
Yeah,
I feel like with a healthy Cam Rising,
a healthy Cam Rising is a healthy Cam Rising is a top 10 quarterback in the country.
Yeah,
there's no questions about that. Top 10. He's not going to be healthy. And listening to Josh, like,
I get a sense he's not going to play, Nick.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody knows. Flip a coin.
I get a sense he might not play, man.
But if he's cleared, he's playing. Like, Kyle Whittingham is doing like the football coach thing. Like, listen, if the doctors say he can play, who am I to say he can't? And this isn't an instance of, well, he hasn't been practicing fully. He's a fifth-year senior.
Yeah, he's a fifth-year senior.
He knows
but
the
I
offense.
Still think there's something to be said. Like, I don't care how many lateral movement. Again, on 3rd and 7 from the UF 48-yard line or 46, late in the game, their final drive, gotta have it. This man had a 29-yard scramble into the red zone that a few plays later, he could have set up the game-winning touchdown or the game-tying field goal, and instead he throws a pick to Amari Burney. But he still made a 29-yard run, and I just don't think that he's going to be able to do that in this game. Now, he's going to have to be able to run and be mobile and have some movement. He's just not going to be a threat like that. And if he is, then they've done a good job of, I think, keeping it under wraps. But so that's the other thing. If he doesn't play, I feel like Florida wins. If he's 100% healthy and can move his legs and run around, or let's say like not even injured and not even coming off this surgery, just had not been injured at all and was coming into this game 100% healthy, I think Utah wins. But then what if he, as Nick has talked about throughout the show, plays but is stationary in the pocket, not able to do his full set of full skill set? And Josh said that he feels like if he's at 85% that they won't play him, or if that he can't do all the things that make him a great quarterback, they won't play him. And maybe that's the case. But it's just it's a weird dynamic, Nick, because I think it really does change the whole matchup and how you view it.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Florida's playing USC and they were like, "Hey, Caleb Williams might not play," or if Florida is going to play Georgia and they're like, "Hey, Carson Beck's out," like you're taking away a person on that team that you can't really replace. And I would be surprised, wouldn't be surprised if Cam Rising can't go. They use both quarterbacks because Bryson Barnes seems to be the veteran that knows the playbook better. And Nate can run.
Yeah, he's a playmaker.
Cam Rising, Nate can run. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Yeah, and that's, that I think the fact, if, reading between the lines, like Josh said from his Monday presser, the fact that he talked up Nate Johnson in the way that he did and made some mention of his skill set. One is to probably make the Florida coaches prepare for him because he knows that they're listening. But two, in the event that Rising doesn't play or gets out there and doesn't feel good after a few series and sits it out, that you're absolutely right, Nick. I think that there's a chance that we see both of those quarterbacks. And if you're not familiar with their quarterback situation, Florida has been preparing for all three guys. They had a backup quarterback, and it wasn't Barnes. It was another signal caller, Brandon Rose, who was going to be QB2, and then he got injured in camp, Nick, because they made their quarterbacks or let their quarterbacks go live in a scrimmage.
Yeah.
To think of that, didn't Muschamp do that at one point with Driscoll and Brissett?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Somebody did. I know some Florida quarterbacks
enough.
went live at some point. We were like, what? That's one way to settle out the competition, is throw them into the fire like that. I mean, Rose's injuries now open the door for Barnes and Nate Johnson to get an opportunity if Cam Rising cannot play. Now, Bryson Barnes, as Josh mentioned, he's a guy that Utah fans are very familiar with. He played in 10 games last season. He threw for 430 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He had his first career start against Washington State, and then he also took over for Rising in the Rose Bowl, threw for 112 yards in that game, a touchdown and a pick. So he's played and seen a lot of action. And then Johnson played in 4 games as a true freshman, and he had a touchdown pass against Stanford, and he carried the ball 5 times, and he had 2 touchdowns. So he's seen a little bit of action, Nick, but honestly, regardless of who is the quarterback, I think that Austin Armstrong is going to bring the house, man. If it's Rising, hits his first game back, he's probably still rusty. The chemistry with his receivers, I'm not going to say it's not going to be there, but again, he's going to be coming off of not all of fall camp in the spring, not going through 11 on 11 and scrimmage work. So I think that he's going to put as much pressure on him as he can. And then if Cam can't play, then you're throwing everything that you can, just like that at Barnes as well. And then Nate Johnson when he's in the game. Now, Nate Johnson, you might have to be a little bit more careful about how you blitz him because of his dual threat ability. But I think Austin's going to be dialing him up, Nick.
Yeah, going back and looking at his defenses, the emphasis on creating havoc.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Blitzing, bringing blitzes from different places, showing shells and coming from somewhere else. But it's going to put a lot of man coverage with maybe a single high safety. You're going to give up big plays, and calm down. I understand your Todd Grantham PTSD, your Patrick Toney PTSD. Don't put the sins of the father on the son. Florida or Austin Armstrong's defense at Southern Miss gave up a ton of 20+ yard passes last year. I think 10 passes of more than 30 yards last year at Southern Miss. They're going to give up big plays. I worry about Florida tackling if it's Nate running the ball. Jordan Travis still hasn't been tackled from last November. So there are questions, there are concerns. I see a lot of people being just like, well, Austin Armstrong figured it out. Our defense is going to be elite. And I'm like, maybe. I don't know. You can't say that with certainty. Their depth is better. But I think Utah presents problems. They've got a 6'5", 245-pound former professional rugby player playing tight end who had 5 touchdowns in their last 6 games last year. Even if Brant Keithy can't go, you've got a jacked Jeremy Crawshaw playing tight end. So there are matchup problems for Florida. Florida's not going to go in there and win 40-14. It's going to be a tough game. I think if Cam Rising doesn't play, I think we would see both. But they also have a really veteran offensive line outside of left tackle and 3 talented running backs. They've got a front 7 who's going to give Florida's offensive line. And we don't know if Princely. We don't know if Kingsley Aguakin's going to play. He's played 24 straight games, 26 straight games, 40 games in his career. And Florida can say all they want about Jake Slaughter and how much they like him and he's ready. He hasn't played in those games. This will be his first real big test. And you're doing it against a bunch of dudes from Utah who are ready to take somebody's lunch in their first career start. So,
especially coming off of that loss last year.
Yeah. So coming off of that loss, coming off of like a heartbreaking loss where you lose your quarterback and to Penn State in the Rose Bowl. You've got your coach who's been there for almost 2 decades, a decade and a half, saying this is one of the best teams he's ever had. Like, this is going to be a confident team in Utah looking to protect their home turf.
No doubt. And Nick mentioned that matchup. We're going to get into some key matchups right here as we give our keys to the game to wrap up the show. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to Prairie Dental Center here in Gainesville, Florida. The doctor is a UF grad who's practiced in town for 3 decades and has developed a deep understanding of how to diagnose and treat various dental problems, along with advanced skills and knowledge to provide more effective and efficient care to his patients. If you're having dental concerns or just need a cleaning, Prairie Dental Center offers a wide range of personalized care options to meet your individual needs. Give their office a call at 352-373-3431. Tell them Gators Online sent you, and your new patient exam will be free. And as we wrap up this week's show, week 1 preview, Florida, Utah just sounds good, rolling off the tongue. We're going to give some keys to the game now and what it's going to take for Florida to go out to Salt Lake City and get this dub and go 2-0 in this home-and-home series against the back-to-back Pac-12 champs. That'll be something that that Billy has as another feather in his cap. And again, before we get into the keys, Nick, I think that Florida could lose this game and without question have a better season than it did last year versus when they won this game last year and then didn't have the season that everybody expected. Because if they come out in week 1 and lose, I think it's going to be easy for folks to be down on this team. But, the potential is there for them to be a better team. They might not have a better record, but this is a game that could go a long way in determining whether they can reach that 8-win mark that I think a lot of folks are shooting for or hoping for in Gator Nation. Vegas, I don't know if Vegas still has them at 5.5, but I think a lot of national media folks have them anywhere from 5 to 6 wins to as low as 4-3. I mean, the Athletic predicted Napier to go 3-9 and to get fired. And what week was that?
Vegas has him at 5.5. The Athletic doesn't even have a beat writer in town. I'm not reading the Athletic when it comes to the Florida Gators anymore.
Well, the Athletic did let the Athletic did have a writer go in there and get to watch a practice during fall camp. So he must not have been impressed by what he saw if they're picking him to go 3-9 and Billy to get fired in year 2, which is not going to happen. even if they do go 3-9, which I seriously doubt will take place. But again, this game right here will go a long way, maybe to determining what type of threshold they can reach in terms of total wins. Nick, as we forecast this for the final time in Gainesville, should we say, we're going to do some more previewing from Salt Lake City. But what are some keys in your mind for this matchup on Thursday night?
Yeah, when I look at Graham Mertz, he's been a turnover machine. Florida will not win this football game if they turn the ball over. I don't really worry. Montrell Johnson's introduction to Florida was fumbling the ball in his very first carry last year. I don't know. I don't think he fumbled. I could be wrong. I don't think he fumbled the rest of the year. Florida won't win this game.
Trevor Etienne fumbled in the game too.
Florida won't win this game if they turn the ball over. If they lose the turnover battle, they won't win this game. I think you need to run the ball effectively. Those 5 guys up front need to create a new line of scrimmage 1 to 2 yards down the field, create holes for these guys to run, and Florida needs to win the turnover battle. On defense, I mentioned those big plays. I think Florida will get to the quarterback. They will create pressure. They will create hurries. I think you need to limit the big plays. And that's something I said that, hey, you're going to have to eat some of those this year because you're going to play this aggressive style of defense. I think you need to kind of limit those on Thursday night.
No doubt. And that's going to be, I think, something that all Florida fans are kind of tuned into on the defensive side is can they do that after that was something that Florida struggled with, trying to get off the field on third downs. There's a lot of issues that they had, and I think one of them was their rushing defense. Florida ranked 100th nationally last year in stopping the run, and that was something that Utah did very well, which was run the ball. They had the nation's number 11 rushing offense last season, 217 yards a game, and they put it to Florida in the swamp last season on the ground. Tavion Thomas, who is no longer on the team, he had a 100-yard game against the Gators, 115 to be exact, and a touchdown on 23 carries. And then, as we mentioned earlier with Josh, Cam Rising, 91 yards on just 7 carries. So they were able to do some damage against the Gators. And even though they lost Thomas, they still have 2 backs in Jackson and Bernard, who both went over 500 yards last season. They were featured a lot in the offense. And, as we heard from Josh, he's a little bit higher on maybe those 2 backs and maybe some other guys on the Utah beat. But regardless, Florida is going to need to defend the run better, not just in this game, but all season. Their impact defensive line transfers and some of the linebackers that they brought in, they're going to need to show up in this game, in the run game specifically, and be difference makers, because that was just where Florida struggled to stop the run last year, was in that front 7. And one more key on the defensive side. We've mentioned obviously the tight end position at length, but regardless of whether it's Brandt or their other tight end that played at the end of last season, kind of showed out, Florida needs to do a better job in coverage. Cam Rising, if he does play, is going to be probably getting out a lot of quick passes and doing a lot of short game, and those guys are going to have to do well. And I think that 2 guys specifically that I'm looking forward to, that I'm interested to see if they can make an impact and just help out in coverage, and that's Manny Nunnery and R.J. Moten. Manny Nunnery, a former safety at Houston, who's probably Florida's best cover linebacker right now, and that's what I was told basically on his performance in fall camp, that he's going to be a guy that should make a difference in coverage at the linebacker spot. So if Brandt does give it a go, I would probably expect to see Nunnery matched up against him. And also, I think R.J. Moten, he's a guy that did really good in coverage against Michigan, and I would expect that he's going to start at safety and get a lot of playing time. So he's a guy that I think that needs to show up at a safety spot that Florida obviously struggled at last year and is still, some question marks going into this season. And then offensive side, we've already alluded to it, but Florida's center situation, if Kingsley doesn't play, obviously Jake has got to step up, and they got to make sure that he's ready for this moment, ready for this matchup, and a preseason first team Pac-12 defensive lineman that he's going to be lined up right against. If Kingsley does play and he's good to go from this lower body injury, Napier listed him as day-to-day kind of going through this week. Even if Kingsley does play, you've got basically a brand new offensive line, save for Austin Barber. So, you're having to make sure that these guys get lined up on a road environment for your first game, dealing with the crowd noise, dealing with Graham Mertz, like being able to settle him in and obviously create space, like you said, Nick, for the running backs. I think that that's going to be very key for Florida in this game. And, last but not least, I don't want to give away all my keys from this Gators Online story. But, I think that Graham Mertz, Josh also already mentioned, some of the issues that he's had in the past. Nick said he's got to, stop with the turnovers. I also think sacks, sticking with the offensive line. If you remember in the spring game, I mean, he was under duress all night. He was sacked, tagged 5 times in that spring game, and he was hurried into a bunch of throws, and that was against guys that couldn't tackle him. They're going to be able to tackle him on Thursday night, and this is a Utah team that loves to blitz. They ranked number 1 in the Pac-12 last season, number 8 nationally in sacks, 41 total on the year. They didn't have any sacks last season against Florida, but that's because Anthony Richardson was playing quarterback. So I think to be able to protect Graham Mertz, especially with all the new pieces on the offensive line against a defense that loves to blitz, that is going to be key for this matchup. If Graham is taking a bunch of sacks, taking a bunch of hits, that is going to be hard for him to get in his comfort zone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I've seen a lot of if Anthony Richardson can make the short passes that Graham Mertz does, we blow Utah out last year. I'm like, all right, well, Anthony also had 3 rushing
5-yard touchdown run.
I think there was a 60-yard touchdown run. It's like, all right, well, you're not going to get that. So you're going to get a whole different style of quarterback. But maybe the offensive line isn't as good as we thought. Maybe it wasn't as good as we thought last year. And those sack numbers were just because you had a 6'4", 240-pound guy who could run 27 miles an hour.
Maybe they just won't be good week 1, and it might take them a few games to gel and to find some chemistry. Like this is a brand new offensive line, especially if Jake Slaughter starts.
Maybe everyone stinks in the athletics, right?
I think that was I think what you said the first time around in response to that was a little bit more accurate. I don't think you could just show up one time and get a pulse on the program.
Yeah. Well, so it will be interesting. I think Florida has a really good chance to come out of here with a win, and then I think. As I talked with Keith Niebuhr last night when we were doing our show, you beat Utah, you beat McNeese, and that sets up for a wonderful night in Gainesville with Tennessee and Florida under the lights. So that's getting ahead of ourselves. But listen, they say one game at a time, one opponent at a time. You and I don't have to put pads on, Zach. We can look down the road.
That's right. We've been looking down the road for a lot of weeks, and now the season is finally here. Week 1 opener at Utah. This home and home series. I don't know next time we're going to be out there, Nick, but we're going to do it up this week. I want to give a shout out to our final sponsor before we get out of here, and encourage all Florida fans to go to RogueShop.com if you have issues sleeping, chronic pain, and/or anxiety and stress. Rogue Shop sells CBD, THC edibles, smokables, and vapes, as well as handcrafted bath salts, soaps, candles, and massage oils. Rogue Shop is a true small business. They have 5 employees and make all of their products with their own cannabis grown in their manufacturing facility. Visit RogueShop.com. That's RUGUE shop.com. And that'll do it for this week's Gators Online show, a early week edition. We'll have a bunch of reaction and previews videos from Salt Lake City, and then a rapid reaction after the game. And then next week we will get to our regularly scheduled programming and get back to our Friday preview shows. But want to make sure that you guys had something to listen to before this. Appreciate everybody that has made it through the dog days of summer with us. Hope we made it go by easier. It's been fun doing these shows and writing all this preview coverage, but now we've got a game to cover. So appreciate Josh for joining us this week to give us his perspective on this Utah team that we will see take on Florida Thursday night from Salt Lake City. For Nick Del Torre, I'm Zach Albaverde.